My dad was a chemist, and from a very young age, I was fascinated by many aspects of the scientific world. Because I often accompany my father to the lab, I spent many days with him surrounded by boiling flasks, colorful solutions, and fascinating chemical processes. As an only child, I treasured those hours when my father and I bonded over our shared passion for the subject of chemistry. In fact, it was this passion that led me to where I am today. Well, let's go through it in order. It's going to be educational and interesting. Listen to the end. My mother left my father and I to be with another man, and since my father never married, our family consisted of just the two of us. My mother cheated on my father, and as a result left such terrible wounds in his life that he never gained the confidence to open his heart to another woman. From my earliest childhood, infidelity seemed to me the most serious betrayal and a crime in the world. My interest in chemistry grew steadily throughout my life. In my spare time, I delved deeper and deeper into the realm of chemicals and mixtures, often conducting experiments in my own home laboratory, which was more like a cabin than anything else. I immersed myself in the chemistry community by attending conferences, reading scientific articles, and engaging in online conversations with other chemists. On a professional level, I realized I was drawn to a different path. Deciding to work in the information technology field, I eventually worked my way up to a director position at a well-known company, even though I went into a completely different line of work in my professional life. I was never able to get rid of the early passion I had for chemistry. Members of my team in it often commented on how impressed they were by my ability to effortlessly move from solving complex technical issues to presenting the complexities of chemical reactions in an engaging way. People spoke of me as a wizard with a chemical secret. One day at work, came face to face with a lovely woman who worked in human resources. As soon as I laid eyes on her, I had a feeling we had already connected. Her cheerful attitude and bright smile completely won my heart, and as a result, couldn't help but fall in love with her. Our bond grew stronger each time we found ourselves together, such as at work events or meetings. As we spent more and more time together, I realized that in addition to her stunning looks, she had a sharp mind and sense of humor. I was pleasantly surprised to learn that she was also deeply interested in science. When we discussed the topic, her eyes would light up with wonder, and she seemed genuinely interested. We often discussed with each other memories from our childhood, and I told her about working in the chemistry lab that belonged to my father. She listened to my stories with genuine curiosity, and as a result, I felt a connection between us. The activities we engaged in during our dates were the epitome of combining science and technology. We were introduced to the wonders of the universe during activities we did together, such as stargazing, visiting museums and planetariums, and other activities. I also opened her eyes to the fascinating world of chemistry by showing her some of the experiments I had seen in my father's lab when I was younger. When she observed the chemical reactions for the first time, she was overcome with excitement and genuine curiosity at the same time. Her eyes lit up with excitement. As time went on, we grew closer to each other, and I couldn't escape the feeling that our paths were destined to cross. While I was at work, I learned that my company was planning a science fair in the near future. It was a chance for employees to showcase their skills and share information about their interests outside of work. When I thought about the fact that I could participate in this event and use it as a stage to showcase my chemical talents, my enthusiasm skyrocketed and my eyes sparkled with joy. After hearing about the event, I discussed it with my girlfriend, and she urged me to jump at the chance when it presented itself. On the day of the event, the show floor came alive with the creativity and originality of all the participants. My table featured an exhibition of chemical reactions, including a variety of combinations, bright flames, and exciting reactions. The table was something I made myself. People from different departments flocked to my booth, eager to see the beauty of chemistry brought to life before their eyes. The judges came to my booth as the day was winding down to inspect my display. They announced that I had won the science fair that was held earlier in the day. After the event, I proposed to my girlfriend, and we both agreed that we wanted to tie the knot of marriage as soon as possible. The next day, when we were on our way home, we got married in the church and informed everyone. The story of our hasty wedding spread like wildfire throughout the office as everyone found out about it. The unexpected turn of events left my colleagues in a state of shock and elation at the same time. Everything was going great in our lives, and we were about to plan a baby, but suddenly, I had to go to another city on a work emergency, as there were technical problems in another branch of my company that had not been solved for a long time, and I had to go there for at least 3 months. We had to postpone the birth of the baby, and within a week, I had packed my bags and moved to another place. As soon as I arrived, I realized how serious the problem was and came to the conclusion that my company did the right thing by sending me here because I would never have been able to handle this job sitting in another city. At first, it was damn near impossible for the two of us to contact each other. We couldn't chat, and there were even times when it was impossible for us to FaceTime. Such a routine was starting to annoy both of us, so my wife decided to surprise me by showing up in my city unannounced one day. However, I couldn't give her much time. Work was literally eating me up. Because she was in a lot of pain and hurt and feeling lonely, she decided to cut short her visit and return home. As I watched her leave, the realization that my decisions had affected our relationship made me feel deeply regretful. As soon as she left, I tried to contact her to express my regret, but none of my messages reached her, and she didn't answer any of my questions. Days passed, and the lack of communication between us continued to weigh on my heart. The thought of living without my wife was unbearable to me, for she meant everything to me. When I finally went to my father for help, I was desperate to know how she was doing. My father, realizing the gravity of the situation, agreed to visit my wife at her place of residence. He knew how much I was attached to her and wanted to bring us closer together. During the visit, he found her very upset, but she was never the less grateful for the gesture. My father conveyed my sadness and sincere regret to my wife in a comforting and compassionate tone. He assured her that my love for her was genuine and that, although work was consuming me, I was beginning to realize how important it was to maintain a healthy work-life balance. She asked for confirmation that I would emphasize our relationship going forward. After that, our relationship more or less matured, and I did my best not to miss a single day of our communication, even for 5 minutes. But I got used to doing it every day, and eventually, we returned to our normal long-distance communication regimen. I began to notice changes in my wife's behavior. It started with a few things. During everyday conversations, she had a tendency to get angry over nothing. At first, I didn't pay much attention to this, believing it was just the result of the normal stress that comes with living alone, chalked it up to the amount of work she had to do, and assumed it would get better with time. As days turned to weeks and time went on, the pattern of her anger became more and more apparent. Even the most innocent conversations escalated into heated arguments, regardless of the topic at hand. I couldn't understand why my wife was so quickly becoming irritated, and as a result, I began to try to tiptoe around any topic that might antagonize her. One evening, during another tense conversation, I decided it was time to address the issue. I talked to her in a friendly manner and mentioned that I was concerned about how her recent actions were affecting our connection with each other. Calmed her fears by assuring her that I was genuinely concerned for her well-being and wanted to know the source of the anxiety she was feeling. She adamantly refused to acknowledge the change in her behavior, and 3.5 days passed in calm. But after that, her attitude became full of rage again. I could not figure out how to solve this mystery, and now I had no alternative left because I had already sent my father away once, and I did not want to involve him in every problem in my personal life. I finally made the decision to take a break from our daily conversations as well as our arguments. I was hoping my wife would contact me or ask what was wrong, to find out why we weren't communicating, but nothing like that happened. I was surprised I called her 2 days later and asked her why the hell she was doing this to me because she already knew that I was not going to stay somewhere else against my will. However, instead of answering my question, she said that she would call me later because she was with her friends at that time. This made my heart beat more frequently and I felt a little resentful. A few minutes later, quite coincidentally, a friend of my wife's best friend called me because she was having trouble with her laptop and she asked me for help. Since I was familiar with my wife's entire group of buddies, I can assume that she wasn't out with her other friends, nor was she out with her best friend. Asked her to put my wife on the phone because I had something very important to tell her, but she informed me that my wife was not with her and also said that she hadn't seen my wife in days. After that, how things were generally going at work and in the office, and then she informed me that my wife was no longer in contact with them. Before the call, I was hoping that my wife was with her friends, but it was already clear that she was not with any of her buddies. After this call, my feelings were heightened as I already had an example of my mother abandoning my father. As a result, I decided to engage a private investigator to observe my wife because I wanted to know what she was hiding, why she was hiding, and why she was cutting ties with all her acquaintances. I received the private investigator's report a week later, and as I sat alone in my living room watching my wife's infidelity, I realized that even though she was my whole world to me, she never thought for a second before cheating on me. There were many pictures, videos, and written messages they exchanged. There were pictures of them kissing in the hotel lobby, in a car driven by her partner, and sometimes in her own car. The private investigator also mentioned in his report that the man my wife was having an affair with had recently been hired by our company. On top of that, he was married and had just been promoted to the position of head of human resources. I needed time to process the implications of this lie, but one thing was certain: I would not leave her alone. I would point out the depravity of her actions and teach her that she should never lie to her husband. Asked my firm to extend my stay because the problems were not even close to being resolved. I had to lie in the office because I couldn't look my cheating wife in the eye, and I also wanted to stay away from her because I needed time to think about my revenge. As soon as I found out about her cheating, I cut off communication with her, and she made no attempt to contact me either. As a result, I was able to use the entire month to develop a plan of action. My father called me and told me he was going on a trip with some friends. That got me thinking, and I was able to convince my father to call my wife and tell her that he and I would be out of town as well. At first he thought it was stupid to tell her that, but then I managed to convince the old man to do what I wanted him to do. And as you'd expect after her father's call, she started meeting her lover at our house. I had learned all this from the private investigation reports, and the last pictures I saw showed the lover and my wife doing it on my own balcony. After looking at that picture, I had had enough. I finally formulated my plan and set about implementing it. My excuse was that I had gotten the flu and didn't want anyone to catch it from me. Took a vacation for a few days and then headed back to my city. After the trip, I made sure my wife was working. Took 2 days to fully equip my residence with spy cameras and use my father's lab to create the chemical I needed. And on the third day, I finally created the chemical I needed, poured it into a bottle, and set it up in my bedroom. The universe was on my side too. Shortly after I created my chemical, they made plans to meet at my house for a hot night. They started kissing in my living room and then moved their passions to my bedroom. I watched them closely. After the foreplay and spooning was over, my wife's lover took it too, rubbed it on his genitals, and then inserted it inside my wife. Then my wife and her lover found themselves right inside each other, making a few jiggles. They stopped abruptly, not realizing what was happening. As they were screaming about what had happened to them, I was laughing loudly in my car. Finally, after much agony and trying all sorts of things, they called emergency services, and when medical help arrived, they were both naked and still in each other. They arrived at the hospital in exactly the same condition. News of this extraordinary case spread immediately, both in the hospital and in the neighborhood. They underwent very serious operations, as a result of which my wife lost her ability to have children, and the man with whom she was having an affair lost his genitals. After investigation, the authorities arrested me as they discovered my entry and exit on the street cameras, and I was found guilty of harming their health. I was sentenced to 8 years in prison, and when I was finally released, it was just me and my father on the loose. While the investigation was going on, I filed for a divorce, and we had to divide all the property. But I was forced to move in with my father after I was released from prison. This was because my wife received a large compensation due to the loss of her organs. I never imagined that I would have to use my chemical knowledge to get revenge because I was feeling rage at the time, and I still had to go through grief after the retribution. When I got out of prison, I was a very different person. I moved on with my life and forgot about my past like one forgets a bad dream, and was ready to start a new chapter in my life. I was unemployed for almost a year until I managed to get a job as an information technology specialist at a local company. Life was getting better. My revenge may seem very cruel to some, and I admit it is, and I am sorry for what I have done. And yet, what would you do if you were me? Dear friends, thank you very much for watching. Leave comments, put likes, share with friends, and subscribe to the channel.